It was Mother's Day, and my son Brandon had just handed his mother-in-law a shimmering envelope tied with a perfect silk bow. I watched from the couch as Diane Morrison, all designer handbag and perfectly manicured nails, opened it with the kind of theatrical excitement you'd expect from someone who'd never wanted for anything in her entire 64 years. Her eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her chest. "Oh my God, Brandon! Lauren, this is too much!" But clearly it wasn't, because my son, the boy I'd raised, pulled her into the tightest hug I'd seen him give anyone in years, maybe ever. "You deserve the world, Diane," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I barely recognized. "You've always been there for us. Always." I sat perfectly still, holding my own gift. A small paper bag. No bow, no shimmer. Everyone clapped. Lauren, my daughter-in-law, wiped away what I'm sure she thought was a very convincing tear. Someone pulled out their phone to take pictures. Diane posed with those tickets in her hand like she'd just won an Oscar. Paris, first class, the Peninsula Hotel, 15 days, all-inclusive. I did the math in my head without meaning to. $12,000. Maybe more. Then all eyes turned to me. Brandon walked over, not rushed, not excited, just obligatory, and handed me my gift with a polite smile, the kind you give a distant acquaintance, not the woman who'd given you life. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." My hands were shaking as I opened the bag, though I tried like hell to keep them steady. Inside was a gift card. I pulled it out and read the amount. $15. From a discount store I'd never even shopped at. There was also a note, written in Brandon's rushed handwriting, the kind that told you it had been done 5 minutes before walking out the door. "Mom, it's important to be grateful for what we have. I love you." Something broke inside me. But it wasn't my heart. I'd felt that break before, in smaller pieces, over months and years. This was something deeper. This was the last shred of hope I'd been clinging to about who my son had become. I looked up. Lauren was watching me with what I can only describe as a barely contained smirk. Diane had that satisfied look of someone who'd just won a silent war I didn't even know I was fighting. And Brandon was waiting for me to say the right thing, to be grateful, to act like I always did. So I smiled. I smiled the way I'd learned to smile through all these years, through the small humiliations, through the slights disguised as concern, through the broken promises and increasingly distant phone calls. "Thank you, honey," I said, my voice calm, steady. What a thoughtful detail. A few guests laughed, uncomfortable, awkward little sounds. Others looked down at their plates. Someone from Lauren's side muttered something about how hard it is to shop for mothers. But I knew the truth. Everyone in that room knew the truth. $15 for the woman who'd sold her sewing machine, her mother's sewing machine, to pay for his college tuition. $15 for the mother who'd worked double shifts for 20 years so he'd never have to take out a loan. $15 for the widow who'd turned down every chance to rebuild her life because her son needed stability. And $12,000 for the woman who'd walked into his life just 5 years ago. I want to tell you how I got here, how the boy I raised became a man I barely recognized. His name is Brandon Michael Caldwell, and he came into this world on a cold March morning 38 years ago. I was 29. His father, David, cried when he held him for the first time. Actually cried, which wasn't like David at all. He was a construction foreman, the kind of man who thought showing emotion meant you were soft. But there he was, tears streaming down his face, holding this tiny wrinkled baby like he was made of glass. "He's perfect, Pat," David whispered. "He's absolutely perfect." We weren't rich. David's construction work paid the bills, but barely. I took in sewing, hemming pants, fixing tears, making prom dresses for the neighborhood girls. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house with pipes that froze every winter and a roof that leaked when it rained too hard. But God, we were happy. We had plans. We had dreams for that little boy sleeping in his secondhand crib. Brandon was 6 when David died. A beam fell on a construction site. Wrong place, wrong time. The kind of accident that happens so fast there's no time to react, no time to run. The doctor said he probably didn't feel anything. I've never known if that was true or just something they tell widows to help them sleep at night. David was 35 years old. I was widowed at 35 with a 6-year-old boy and $50,000 in debt from medical bills and funeral costs. I didn't let myself cry much in those early days. I couldn't. Brandon would look at me with those enormous brown eyes, David's eyes, searching for answers I didn't have, for security I could barely fake. So I dried my tears and I made decisions. I sold everything that wasn't essential. The good china we'd gotten as wedding gifts. David's tools, the ones that weren't already claimed by the company. His truck. Our second car. I kept only my sewing machine and turned our living room into a workshop. I worked from 5 in the morning until midnight. Prom dresses, alterations, curtains, tablecloths. Whatever anyone needed, I'd sew it. Brandon grew up watching me from behind that sewing machine. I'd help him with his homework between seams, my fingers never stopping. I'd make him breakfast before dawn and dinner after dark. On weekends, when other kids went to the park with both parents, Brandon would sit next to me and hand me spools of thread. He'd help me measure fabric. "Someday we're going to have a bigger house, Mom," he'd tell me in that sweet child's voice, full of hope I couldn't afford to have. "And you won't have to work so hard." I'd stroke his hair and believe him. I believed him because I needed to believe in something. When Brandon was 14, he came home with a letter from school. He'd been accepted into a program for gifted students, a chance to attend a better high school across town, one with college prep classes and opportunities our neighborhood school couldn't offer. But it cost money. Not much for the families I saw in magazines, but for me, it was a fortune. Special uniforms, books, bus fare to get across town, lab fees, materials for advanced classes. I worked more. I took jobs other seamstresses turned down because they were too complicated or didn't pay enough. My hands started to ache at night. My eyes burned from staring at needles under the yellow light of my old lamp. But Brandon went to that school, and he was brilliant. Straight A's. Teacher's pet. I went to every parent-teacher conference in my mended clothes and worn-out shoes, but I held my head high because my son was the best student in his class. Then came college. He got into state on a partial scholarship, half tuition covered. I needed to come up with the rest. $22,000 a year for 4 years. I sold my antique sewing machine, my mother's machine, the one she taught me on, and bought a cheaper electric one from Walmart. I sold the few pieces of jewelry David had given me over the years. I sold my wedding ring and told Brandon I'd lost it so he wouldn't feel guilty. During those 4 years, I ate less so his bank account could have more. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. I didn't go to the doctor even when my back started giving me trouble that wouldn't go away. I allowed myself no luxuries, no pleasures, no rest. I documented everything. I kept every receipt, every bank transfer, every sacrifice. Not because I expected to be paid back. That's not how mother's love works, but because I wanted to remember. I wanted proof, even if just for myself, that it had been real, that it had mattered. Over 18 years, I spent $147,000 on my son's future. I did the math one sleepless night, adding up every tuition payment, every book, every fee, every meal plan. $147,000 on a seamstress's income. And Brandon graduated with honors. He landed a job at a big consulting firm making more in his starting salary than I'd made in 3 years. He moved into a nice apartment downtown. He bought a car that cost more than I'd paid for our old house. "Now it's my turn to take care of you, Mom," he told me the day he signed his contract, his eyes shining with the same hope he'd had as a child. "Everything you did for me, I'm going to give back to you." Multiplied. I cried that day. Happy tears, I thought. I thought all the sacrifice had been worth it. I thought I could finally rest. I thought my son and I would be close, that he'd keep that promise he'd been making since he was 6 years old. But then, 3 years later, he met Lauren. At first, she seemed nice enough, pretty in that polished way, the kind of pretty that costs money to maintain. She came from a completely different world. Her father owned a chain of hardware stores across 3 states. Her mother, Diane, had never worked a day in her life unless you counted charity galas and country club committees. When Brandon brought her to meet me, I tried so hard. I cooked his favorite meal, pot roast, the way David used to make it. I showed Lauren the photo albums, all those pictures of Brandon as a baby, as a little boy. I told her stories about when we were poor but happy. Lauren smiled through it all, but it was a cold smile. Her eyes scanned my small apartment, the worn furniture, the outdated kitchen, the bare walls, with an expression I knew well. I'd seen it on the faces of wealthy women who'd come to my sewing shop over the years. Pity mixed with superiority. politeness wrapped around disdain. After that visit, Brandon started to change. Small things at first. He'd call less often. When I called him, his answers got shorter. "I'm busy, Mom. Can we talk later?" But later never came. The visits became less frequent. Once a month became every 2 months. Then only holidays. When he announced the engagement, I was happy for him, truly. But I also had this knot in my stomach I couldn't explain, like my body knew something my heart didn't want to accept. The wedding was huge, expensive. Lauren's family paid for everything: the venue, the catering, the flowers, the band. I couldn't contribute anything meaningful. $500 was all I could scrape together, and even that felt like putting a single drop of water in an ocean. I sat at a table in the back with some distant cousins of David's who barely remembered me. Diane greeted me that day with a pat on the shoulder and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be so proud that Brandon has come so far," she said, as if she'd had anything to do with it. After the wedding, everything got worse. Brandon and Lauren moved into a 3-story house with a perfect lawn and a 2-car garage. I visited once in the first month. Lauren gave me a tour, showing off each room with barely concealed pride. But I could feel it. I wasn't really welcome. It was like visiting a museum, not a home. "Mom, you need to call before you come over," Brandon told me a week later when I'd shown up with a casserole I'd made for them. His voice was gentle but firm. "Lauren needs her space. We need our privacy." I apologized. I promised to always call first. I promised not to be a bother. And I kept that promise. I called before every visit. I asked if it was a good time. I never stayed longer than an hour. I always brought something: food, a small gift, so I wouldn't arrive empty-handed. But the invitations became rarer and rarer. Brandon's birthdays started happening without me. "It's just something small, Mom. Just us." Then I'd see photos on Facebook of a huge party with all of Lauren's friends and her entire family. 3 months before that Mother's Day, something happened that I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Brandon had stopped by my apartment, unusual in itself. He said he had a meeting nearby and needed to use my bathroom. I was thrilled just to see him for those few stolen minutes. I made coffee while he was in the bathroom. When he came out, his phone was sitting on my kitchen table. He'd been in such a hurry, he'd forgotten it. I was about to take it to him when it buzzed. The screen lit up. It didn't have a lock on it, or maybe he'd disabled it temporarily. I don't know. But I could see the full message that appeared. From Lauren. "Is your mother gone yet? My mom is coming in an hour, and I don't want them to run into each other. You know how she gets around people like that. People like that." 3 words. They hit me like a physical blow. My hands started shaking. The phone felt heavy, dangerous, like I was holding evidence of a crime. Brandon came out of the bathroom, drying his hands. He saw his phone in my hands. He saw my face. He knew. "Mom, it's not what you think." "And what is it that I think, Brandon?" My voice was calmer than I felt. "Jessica didn't mean it that way. It's just, my mother-in-law is very particular. When there are visitors, she prefers the house to be quiet." "Quiet," I repeated. "I'm the one who interrupts the quiet." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Brandon grabbed his phone, clearly uncomfortable. He looked at his watch. "I have to go, Mom. I'm already late." "Of course, go. I don't want to be any more of a bother." "Mom, please don't make this harder." He left. No hug, no kiss, no looking back. I stood there in my kitchen with 2 cups of coffee no one was going to drink, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath my feet. People like that. As if I were less than. As if all those years of sacrifice had turned me into something shameful. As if my poverty were contagious. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept seeing those words on his screen. Kept hearing the casual cruelty in them. The next morning I did something I'm not proud of, but I needed to understand. I needed to know how bad it really was. I called Brandon and told him I'd found some old documents of his father's, things I thought he might want to see. Legal papers, old photos. It was partly true. I did have those things. He came over that Saturday, early, seeming rushed as usual. While he looked through the box of papers, I made coffee again. And when he went to the bathroom, I picked up his phone from the table. This time it had a password. My hands were sweating. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it through the bathroom door. But I had to know. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried his wedding date. Wrong. Then I tried Lauren's birthday. The phone unlocked. I opened his messages and started scrolling. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. So much worse. And that's when I knew. The son I'd raised was gone. And the woman I'd been, the grateful, forgiving, self-sacrificing mother, she needed to die too. Because if I'd learned anything in 68 years, it was this. Sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones most willing to destroy themselves for you. And I was done destroying myself. I spent that entire Saturday scrolling through Brandon's phone while he sat in my living room, oblivious, looking at old photos of his father. The messages went back months, years maybe. Lauren to Brandon. Your mom called again. That's 3 times this week. It's exhausting. Brandon to Lauren. I know. I'll tell her I'm busy. It always works. Lauren to Brandon. Your mom brought that weird food she makes again. I don't even know what it is. I threw it out after she left. Brandon to Lauren. She means well. It's her way of showing love. Lauren to Brandon. It's her way of reminding us she comes from a different level. My mom says it's emotional manipulation. Brandon to Lauren. Maybe. I hadn't thought of it that way. Every message was a knife. But I kept reading because I needed to see the bottom. I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. Then I found the group chat. It was called the Morrison-Caldwell Alliance. Just 3 people, Lauren, Diane, and someone named Real Estate Rick, apparently Diane's financial advisor. Brandon wasn't even in it. I scrolled through, my stomach turning. Diane. The old woman's house is worth at least $400,000. That's equity Brandon should be controlling. What if she gets sick and some nursing home takes it all? Real estate. Rick. I've seen it happen. Elder assets vanish into medical care. If Brandon can get power of attorney now while she's healthy, he can protect the investment. Lauren. How do we bring it up without seeming like we're after her money? Diane. You frame it as concern. Mom, we worry about you living alone. What if you fall? What if you forget to pay bills? Start small. Plant seeds. Lauren. Brandon feels guilty, though. Every time I mention it, he shuts down. Diane. Then you work on him slowly. Make him see it's for her benefit. Men like Brandon need to think they're being heroes. I heard the toilet flush. Brandon was coming back. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I closed everything, locked it, and set it exactly where it had been. When Brandon walked back into the kitchen, I was pouring coffee like nothing had happened. You okay, Mom? He asked. You look pale. Just tired, honey. Didn't sleep well last night. We drank our coffee. We talked about nothing important. His work, the weather, whether I'd seen the new grocery store that opened nearby. I nodded and smiled and said all the right things at all the right times. But inside, something had fundamentally shifted. When Brandon left that day, I closed the door behind him and I let myself cry. I cried for hours. Deep, ugly sobs that came from somewhere I didn't even know existed. I cried for the boy he'd been. I cried for the man he'd become. I cried for all the years I'd wasted believing that a mother's love was enough to overcome anything. But after the tears came something different. Clarity. Cold, crystalline clarity. They wanted my money. They wanted my house. They wanted me to disappear quietly from their lives without causing problems. They wanted me to sign papers giving Brandon control. And then what? Stick me in some wonderful retirement home where I'd be out of sight, out of mind? I dried my face and went to my bedroom. In the back of my closet, behind old boxes and clothes I no longer wore, there was a metal lockbox. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were all my important documents. The deed to my apartment, paid off 5 years ago. David's life insurance papers. Bank statements showing $63,000 in savings that I'd built up, dollar by painful dollar, over 30 years. Everything was in my name. Only my name. Brandon had no access to anything. Not yet. Thank God. I closed the box and sat on my bed, thinking, planning. Then I remembered Theodore Sullivan. I hadn't spoken to Theo in almost 8 years, but I'd never forgotten him. He'd been my neighbor back when Brandon was in high school, a lawyer with a small but respectable practice, a wife, 2 kids, a nice house next door to my little place. He seemed to have it all figured out, until his wife left him and took everything. She'd accused him of things that weren't true, affairs, financial manipulation, Things I knew in my bones were lies because I'd seen how that man was with his family. But in court, with her family's expensive lawyers, Theo didn't stand a chance. He lost the house, lost his savings, lost his reputation, had to close his practice. He moved into a tiny studio apartment in the same building as me. I'd see him coming home at night in wrinkled clothes, carrying Chinese takeout, with the kind of hollow look in his eyes that told you he was barely holding on. For 6 months, I brought him food. Not much, I didn't have much, but soup, sandwiches, sometimes just a thermos of hot coffee. He tried to pay me. I always refused. "Someday I'm going to repay you for this, Patricia," he'd tell me. "When I get back on my feet, I swear I'm going to make this up to you." "You don't owe me anything, Theo. Neighbors help each other. It's how we survive." One day he knocked on my door with a suitcase. He'd gotten a job at a law firm in the city, a fresh start. It didn't pay much at first, but it was his chance to rebuild. "I don't know how to thank you, Patricia. You literally saved my life. There were nights I thought about giving up, but then you'd show up with your food and your smile and remind me there was still goodness in the world." We kept in touch for a while, Christmas cards, the occasional email, but eventually life got busy and we drifted apart, until now. I found his number in my old address book and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. It rang 3 times. "Hello? Theo, it's Patricia. Patricia Caldwell. I don't know if you remember." "Patricia." His voice changed immediately, warmer. "Of course I remember you. How are you? It's been years." I need your help, Theo. It's urgent. It's about my son, and it's complicated." There was a brief silence. Then his voice became serious, professional. "Tell me where and when. I'll be there." We met 2 days later at a coffee shop on the other side of town, far from anywhere Brandon or Lauren might go. Theo had changed. The broken man I'd known was gone. His hair was gray now, but perfectly cut. He wore a simple but expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase. When he saw me walk in, he stood up and pulled me into a genuine hug. "You look good, Theo," I said. "I'm here because of you, Patricia. I never forget that." He pulled back and looked me in the eyes. "Every case I win, every client I help, I think about those nights when you were the only person who treated me like I was still human. So whatever you need, whatever's happening, I'm here." We sat down, ordered coffee, and then I told him everything. I told him about Brandon and how he'd changed, about Lauren and her family, about the messages I'd found, about the group chat planning to take my house, about the $15 Mother's Day gift and Diane's $12,000 trip to Paris. Theo listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small leather notebook. His expression grew darker with every sentence. "Do you still have access to those messages?" he asked when I finished. "No, I only saw them that once. Brandon has a password now." "Okay, and your assets, the house, the bank accounts, everything's in your name?" "Yes, everything. Brandon has no legal access to anything." "Good. That's very good, Patricia." He put down his pen and looked at me. "But I need you to tell me something with complete honesty. What do you want to achieve here?" The question surprised me. I was quiet for a moment, staring at my coffee. "I want justice," I said finally. "I want them to understand they can't treat me like I'm nothing. I want them to know that the woman they underestimated isn't as weak as they thought." Theo nodded slowly. "Then we're going to get you justice. But it has to be smart, legal, and final. No room for them to challenge it later. Can you do exactly what I tell you, even when it's hard?" "Yes." "Can you keep pretending everything's normal? Smile at them? Accept their treatment? Not let them know you're planning anything?" I thought about all the years I'd already done exactly that, smiled when it hurt, accepted scraps, and acted grateful. "I've been practicing my whole life," I said. Theo reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "This is going to end well, Patricia. I promise you. But you have to trust me completely. No improvising, no emotional confrontations. Cold, calculated, patient." "I understand. One more thing." His expression became serious. "When we execute this plan, when everything comes out, your relationship with Brandon will probably be over. Maybe forever. Are you prepared for that?" The question hurt, but the answer was clear. "I've already lost him, Theo. The son I raised doesn't exist anymore. The man he is now doesn't want me in his life. He wants my assets. So I have nothing left to lose. Then let's begin. Over the next 2 hours, Theo laid out the plan. Step 1. Document everything. Starting immediately, I would keep a detailed journal of every interaction with Brandon, Lauren, and Diane. Dates, times, what was said, who else was present. Every phone call, every canceled visit, every cold shoulder. Step 2. Protect my assets legally. Theo would draft documents ensuring no one could touch my house or bank accounts without my explicit written consent. We'd get statements from 3 independent doctors certifying I was of sound mind, evidence that no one could later claim I was manipulated or mentally incompetent. Step 3. Strategic downsizing. I would sell my apartment within the next 4 months. The buyer would be someone Theo knew, a clean, legitimate sale at fair market value. The contract would include a clause allowing me to rent back the property for 6 months while I looked for a new place. But the sale would be final, irrevocable. Step 4. Evidence gathering. Theo would hire a private investigator, someone licensed, legal, completely above board. This investigator would document Brandon and Lauren's lifestyle, their spending, their time with Diane versus their time with me. All legal, all admissible in court if needed. Step 5. The long game. I would continue playing the role of the grateful, naive mother. I would accept their treatment. I would not resist when they started applying more pressure to sign documents. I would simply redirect, delay, and document. Step 6. The revelation. 1 year from now, on the next Mother's Day, I would host a family gathering. Everyone would be invited. All of Brandon's relatives, old family friends, people who'd known us for years. And at that gathering, with everyone present as witnesses, I would reveal everything. It has to be public, Theo explained. If you confront them privately, they'll deny it. They'll gaslight you. They'll make you seem like a bitter, confused old woman. But if you do it in front of the family with evidence, with documentation, they can't escape it. Won't that be cruel? I asked, humiliating them in front of everyone. Is it cruel when they've been doing the same to you for years, just more quietly? Theo's voice was gentle but firm. Patricia, they're planning to take everything from you. Your home, your independence, your dignity. This isn't about revenge. It's about protecting yourself and making sure they can't do this to anyone else. He was right. I knew he was right. How much will this cost? I asked. The lawyer fees, the investigator? Nothing. You're not paying me a cent. He held up his hand when I tried to protest. Patricia, you fed me when I was starving. You gave me hope when I wanted to die. This is how I repay that debt. Let me do this. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. There's one more thing you need to understand, Theo said quietly. This year is going to be the hardest of your life. You're going to have to watch them treat you badly and not react. You're going to have to smile through humiliation. You're going to have to be stronger than you've ever been. Can you do that? I thought about David, about working 18-hour days while raising Brandon alone, about selling my wedding ring, about all the years of sacrifice that had led me to this moment. Yes, I said, I can do that. Then let's get started. The next 6 months were exactly as hard as Theo had warned. Brandon invited me to dinner. Lauren was overly friendly, which immediately made me suspicious. Diane was there too, holding court from the head of the table like she owned the place. Over dessert, Brandon brought it up. Mom, Lauren and I have been talking about your situation. My situation? I asked innocently. You live alone. You're getting older. What if something happens? What if you fall and no one's there? I'm 68, honey, not 90. We know, Mom, but we want to make sure you're protected. He glanced at Lauren for support. We thought maybe it would make sense to put some things in my name, just for security. The apartment, the bank accounts. That way, if anything happens, everything's already in order. I took a sip of water, counting to 10 in my head like Theo had taught me. That's very thoughtful, Brandon, but I still feel capable of managing my own affairs. When I don't anymore, I'll let you know. I saw frustration flicker across Lauren's face. Diane's smile became tighter. Brandon pushed a little more, using gentle words about planning for the future and avoiding probate complications. But I held firm with politeness and smiles. That night I called Theo immediately. They tried, just like you said they would. And you said no? Sweetly, exactly like you taught me. Perfect. Now they'll try a different approach. Stay alert. Lauren called me directly for the first time in months. Patricia, I found this wonderful financial advisor. He specializes in retirement planning for seniors. I thought maybe you'd like to meet with him, just to make sure your money is working as hard as it can for you. That's kind of you, dear. Let me think about it. It's really important, Patricia. At your age, you need professional help with these things. At your age, like I was already senile. I'll consider it, Lauren. Thank you. She called twice more that week. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, then waited 3 days before calling back with apologetic excuses about being out, being busy, being tired. Meanwhile, Theo's investigator was working. His name was James Carter, a former police detective in his 50s with a kind face and sharp eyes. He started following Brandon and Lauren, legally, always in public spaces where there's no expectation of privacy. The photos started coming in. Brandon and Lauren at Morton's Steakhouse. Bill total, $387. Brandon, Lauren, and Diane at a spa resort in Napa Valley. 3-day weekend. Estimated cost, $4,200. Lauren shopping on Fifth Avenue. Single afternoon. Shopping bags from Prada, Gucci, Chanel. And during those same weeks, Brandon called me once. A 5-minute conversation where he sounded distracted the entire time. I documented it all in my journal. February 14th, Brandon called at 3:47 p.m., said he was just checking in, asked if I needed anything. I said no. He said, "Okay, love you, Mom. Gotta run." Call lasted 4 minutes, 32 seconds. He did not ask how I was feeling. Did not ask about my doctor's appointment, which I'd mentioned last time we spoke. Did not remember it was the anniversary of David's death. My apartment sold in March to a buyer Theo had vetted carefully. A young couple, legitimate financing, fair market value of $385,000. The contract included the 6-month rental clause, and they were happy to have a guaranteed responsible tenant. Brandon never knew. I didn't tell him. Why would I? He never asked about my life anymore. The money went directly into a trust account Theo had set up. Untouchable, protected, mine. I actually did fall one day in April. Not seriously. I slipped on a wet floor in the grocery store and bruised my hip, but it hurt, and I was shaken. I called Brandon from the emergency room. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I fell, honey. I'm at the hospital. They're saying it's just a bruise, but, oh God, okay. Which hospital? I'll be right there." For a moment, I heard my son, the real Brandon, the one who used to worry about me. But then I heard Lauren's voice in the background. "Is it serious? We have dinner with my parents in an hour." "Hold on, Mom." Brandon's voice became muffled. Then he came back on. "Mom, listen, if the doctors are saying it's just a bruise, do you really need me to come? I mean, you're already being treated, right?" Something in my chest cracked. "No, honey, you're right. I'm fine. Go to your dinner." "You're sure? Because I can come if you really need me." "I'm sure. Have fun tonight." He hung up, relieved. I sat in that emergency room for 4 hours. They x-rayed my hip, confirmed it was just a deep bruise, gave me painkillers and a lecture about being more careful at my age. Sarah, Brandon's cousin, a nurse at a different hospital, saw my Facebook post about the fall and drove across town to pick me up. "Where's Brandon?" she asked, helping me to her car. "He had plans." "Aunt Pat, you were in the ER. What plans could possibly be more important?" I didn't answer. What could I say? Sarah drove me home, helped me up the stairs, made sure I had food and water. "I'm checking on you every day this week," she said firmly. "And Aunt Pat? I don't know what's going on with Brandon, but this isn't right. You know that, right?" "I know, sweetie. Thank you." After she left, I added the incident to my journal. Every detail. The call, Brandon's hesitation, Lauren's voice in the background, the 4 hours alone, Sarah's kindness. June 20th. I turned 68. Brandon sent a text at 11:47 a.m. "Happy birthday, Mom. We love you so much." Generic, impersonal. Probably sent while he was in a meeting. He didn't call, didn't visit, didn't send a card. That evening, I saw on Facebook that Lauren had posted photos from Diane's birthday party, which coincidentally was the same day as mine, a huge celebration at some country club. Brandon was in every photo, smiling wide, arm around his mother-in-law. Sarah called me that night. "Aunt Pat, I saw those photos. Please tell me Brandon at least came to see you today." "He's busy, Sarah, I understand." No, you shouldn't understand. She was crying. "Aunt Pat, you deserve so much better than this." "I know, sweetie, I know." After I hung up, I allowed myself to cry too. Not because my feelings were hurt. I was beyond that now. But because it was my birthday, and I was alone, and my son had chosen someone else's mother over his own. But then I dried my tears and called Theo. "It's time," I said. "Let's start planning the dinner." In July, I called Brandon with my proposal. "Honey, I've been thinking. I'd like to host a family gathering for next Mother's Day. A big one. Bring everyone together." Brandon sounded surprised. That's really nice, Mom. But wouldn't that be a lot of work for you?" "I'd like to do it. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to see the whole family together, maybe one last time." The phrase "one last time" did what I knew it would. Triggered his guilt. "Don't talk like that, Mom. You've got years ahead of you." "We never know, honey. So will you help me? Can we do it at your house? It's so much bigger and nicer than my place." "Of course. Yeah, we can do that. Lauren and I will handle the food and everything. You just show up and enjoy yourself." "Thank you, sweetheart. Can you make sure everyone's invited? Your Uncle Robert, Sarah and her family, Emily from next door, all the cousins. I have a list." "That's a lot of people, Mom." "I know, but I want them all there. Please, Brandon, for me." He couldn't refuse, not without seeming heartless. "Okay, Mom, we'll make it happen." What Brandon didn't know was that I'd already contacted every single person on that list personally. I'd sent each one a carefully worded email. "Dear Name, I'm hosting what will likely be my last big family gathering on Mother's Day. But this isn't just a celebration. There's something important I need to share with all of you. Something about my future and my family that I need witnesses for. Please come. I need you there not just as a guest, but as someone who cares about the truth. With love, Patricia Caldwell." The responses came quickly. Everyone said yes. Many replied with concern, asking if I was okay, if something was wrong. I told them all the same thing. Everything will be clear at the dinner, I promise. Theo reviewed the video footage one final time in his office. We'd spent weeks editing it down, 22 minutes of my life distilled into images, numbers, and undeniable evidence. "This is powerful, Patricia," he said quietly. "But you need to be absolutely sure. Once we show this, there's no taking it back. Brandon will probably never forgive you." I looked at the screen, at the photos of my young son, at the evidence of what he'd become. "He already doesn't forgive me, Theo, for being poor, for being an embarrassment, for existing. At least this way everyone will know the truth." "Then we're ready." I looked at him. This man I'd saved years ago, who was now saving me. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know, but you're also the strongest person I've ever met. You're going to get through this." I hoped he was right. The months crawled and flew simultaneously. Every day felt like a year. Every week disappeared in a blink. I continued playing my role, the grateful mother, the woman who asked for nothing, the burden they were so generously tolerating. And with each smile I faked, each slight I endured, each humiliation I documented, I felt the old Patricia dying, and someone new being born, someone who knew her worth, someone who wouldn't accept scraps anymore, someone who was done apologizing for existing. The private investigator finished his work in early April. His final report was devastating and perfect. Subject Brandon Caldwell and spouse Lauren Caldwell, over 6-month observation period, 47 documented meals/events with maternal grandmother Diane Morrison, 0 visits to biological mother Patricia Caldwell, average phone call frequency, 2 calls per week to P. Caldwell, duration 3 to 7 minutes. Average phone call frequency, 4 to 5 calls per day to D. Morrison, duration 15 to 45 minutes. Estimated spending on entertainment/luxury goods, $31,400. Estimated spending on P. Caldwell, gifts, meals, etc., $15. $15. After 6 months, that number hadn't changed. 2 weeks before Mother's Day, Theo and I did a final run-through in his office. "You're sure about this?" he asked one last time. We can still call it off. Just protect your assets and walk away quietly. I shook my head. They need to understand, not just that they can't have my money, but that they can't treat people this way, that every action has consequences. Then let's show them. Mother's Day was 1 week away, and I was ready. Mother's Day arrived on a perfect spring evening, the kind of evening that makes you believe in new beginnings. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 5:30, putting on the dress I'd bought for this occasion. Deep emerald green, David's favorite color. I'd paid more for this dress than I'd spent on clothes in the past 5 years combined, and I didn't feel guilty about it. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick. My reflection looked back at me, not the tired, worn-down woman I'd been a year ago, but someone different, someone who knew what she was worth. I arrived at Brandon's house at 6 o'clock sharp. There were already a dozen cars lining the street. Through the windows, I could see people gathering, aunts, uncles, cousins, old friends. Lauren answered the door. Her expression flickered with surprise when she saw me. "Patricia, you look different." "Thank you, Lauren. It's a special occasion." I walked past her into the house. The dining room had been transformed. A long table set for 35 people, flowers everywhere, soft lighting. It would have been beautiful if I didn't know what was coming. Robert Caldwell, David's brother, pulled me into a hug. "Patty, it's been too long. You look wonderful." "Thank you, Robert." Sarah appeared at my elbow, squeezing my hand. She leaned in close. "Whatever you're planning, Aunt Pat, I'm here. I've got your back." I squeezed back, grateful. Brandon emerged from the kitchen, stopping short when he saw me. For just a moment, something crossed his face. Recognition, maybe. A glimpse of the son who used to see me as a person, not an obligation. "Mom, you look great. That's a new dress?" I decided it was time to spend a little on myself. Diane swept past with a wine glass, barely acknowledging me. She was holding court with Lauren's cousins, laughing loudly about some charity gala. She owned this space, this family, or so she thought. Theo arrived last, carrying a leather briefcase. Brandon greeted him warmly. "Great to finally meet you, Mr. Sullivan. Mom's told me so much about you." If only he knew. Dinner was elaborate. Catered, of course. Lauren had spared no expense. On Diane's recommendation, I'm sure. The conversation flowed easily around me. People asked about my health, my life, but in that polite way that doesn't require real answers. I ate slowly, watching everything. Brandon at the head of the table with Lauren beside him. Diane across from me, radiant in her designer outfit. Sarah keeping a protective eye on me from 3 seats down. Theo sitting quietly, his briefcase at his feet. After dessert, Brandon stood up and tapped his wine glass. "Everyone, thank you so much for coming tonight. It means the world to me and Lauren that you're all here to celebrate Mother's Day with both our families." Polite applause. Lauren beamed. "I especially want to thank my mom for bringing us all together." "Mom, stand up." I stood. More applause. "Before we continue," Brandon said, pulling an envelope from his jacket, "Lauren and I wanted to do something special. Mom, we know you've been living alone for so long and we worry about you. So we've decided we want you to come live with us." Surprised murmurs rippled through the room. "We've converted the upstairs guest room into a suite for you. You'd have your own space, but we'd be there if you needed anything. What do you say, Mom?" Every eye turned to me. Some faces showed approval. Others looked uncertain, like they sensed something wasn't right. "That's incredibly generous, Brandon." My voice was calm, steady. "But I'm going to have to decline." His smile faltered. "Mom, don't be stubborn. This is what's best. Actually, since we're all here, I'd like to share something too." I looked at Theo. He stood, moving toward the large screen on the wall, the one Brandon used for movie nights. "Something I think everyone should see." Brandon's face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth?" Theo connected his laptop. The screen came to life. "Mom, I really don't think—" Brandon started toward Theo. "Sit down, Brandon," Robert said sharply. "Let your mother speak." The room fell silent. The video began with a photo of me as a young woman, holding baby Brandon. David stood behind us, his hand on my shoulder, all of us smiling. My voice played over the image, recorded weeks ago in Theo's office. "My name is Patricia Caldwell. I'm 68 years old. I'm Brandon Caldwell's mother, and this is my story." The photos advanced. Our small house, me at my sewing machine, Brandon doing homework beside me, David's funeral, Brandon's graduations, each image accompanied by simple facts. When my husband died, Brandon was 6. I was 35 with $50,000 in debt. I worked 18-hour days for 15 years to give my son every opportunity. I sold my wedding ring to pay his tuition. He never knew. Over 22 years, I invested $147,000 in my son's future. The numbers appeared on screen. Every receipt, every bank transfer, documented and undeniable. Someone gasped. I didn't look to see who. Then the tone shifted. My son promised to take care of me when he could. I believed him. Brandon's face appeared, a video I'd found on his phone from years ago. Everything you did for me, Mom, I'll give back tenfold, I promise. But then he met Lauren. The messages started appearing, large, unavoidable. Lauren to Brandon. Your mom called again. That's 3 times this week. It's exhausting. Brandon to Lauren. I know. I'll tell her I'm busy. I heard a chair scrape. Looked over to see Emily Foster, my neighbor, with her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. More messages scrolled across the screen. Lauren to Brandon. That weird food she makes. I threw it out after she left. Diane to Lauren. The old woman's house is worth $400,000. Brandon needs to get control of it before some nursing home takes everything. Lauren to Diane. How do we get him to ask for power of attorney without seeming greedy? Diane stood up abruptly. This is illegal. You can't display private. All obtained legally, Theo said calmly. Everything you're seeing was either given voluntarily, found in public spaces, or accessed with proper legal authority. I have documentation if you'd like to review it. Diane sat down, her face crimson. The video continued. Now came the graphs. Clean, clinical, devastating. Communication frequency. Brandon to Patricia. 2 calls per week, average 4 minutes. Brandon to Diane. 4 to 5 calls per day, average 30 minutes. Time spent. Visits to Patricia, 6 months. 0 visits to Diane, 6 months. 23. Money spent on Diane's Paris trip, $12,000. On Patricia's Mother's Day gift, $15. The number 15 appeared on the screen. Huge, undeniable, $15. Robert made a sound, half groan, half curse. Sarah was crying silently. Then came the final segment. My face filled the screen, speaking directly to the camera. Last Mother's Day, my son gave me $15 and told me to be grateful. So I spent this year learning what I should actually be grateful for. On screen, I paused. Let the silence build. I'm grateful for my clarity, for finally seeing the truth. I'm grateful for my dignity, which I'm taking back tonight. The documents appeared. Legal papers, clear and official. I've sold my home. The money is in a trust that only I can access. Not because I don't love my son, but because I've learned that love without respect is just another word for being used. My voice softened. This isn't revenge, Brandon. This is me choosing myself. Something I should have done years ago. The screen went black. The silence in that room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Theo began distributing envelopes, 1 to each adult present. Inside was a packet, copies of the key evidence, the legal documents protecting my assets, and a personal letter I'd written to each person. Brandon opened his with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain away, watched something inside him break. His letter said, Brandon, I don't know if you can come back from this. I don't know if the boy I raised still exists somewhere inside the man you've become. But I need you to know, I forgive you, even if I can't forget. The door is never completely closed, but you'll have to walk through it as someone who understands what he did, not as someone who wants what I have. I love you. I always will. But I love myself now, too. Mom, Lauren was the first to move. She stood up so violently her chair fell backward. You vindictive, manipulative... You planned this whole thing just to humiliate us. No, Sarah said, standing as well. Her voice was shaking with anger. She planned this to protect herself from people who were trying to steal everything she had. We weren't stealing anything, Lauren shrieked. We were trying to help her. Help her? Emily Foster stood, all 70 years of her quivering with rage. I've known Patricia for 40 years. When my husband died, she brought me meals for 6 months. When I had surgery, she stayed with me around the clock. That's help, young lady. What you did was greed. Robert addressed Brandon, his voice hard. Your father was my baby brother. When he died, I promised him I'd watch out for you and Patty. I failed. I let this happen. But David would be ashamed of you right now, boy. Ashamed. Brandon's face crumpled. Uncle Robert, don't. Robert held up his hand. Just don't. Diane tried to rally. This is all taken out of context. Patricia, you're being dramatic. Mrs. Morrison, Theo interrupted smoothly. Would you like me to play the audio recording of you and your daughter discussing how to manipulate Brandon into getting his mother to sign away her assets? Because I have that too. Legally obtained in a public restaurant where you had no expectation of privacy. Diane's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. One by one, people approached me. Robert hugged me tight. Patty, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this. Sarah kissed my cheek. I'll call you every week, I promise. You're not alone. Old friends, distant cousins, people who'd known me for decades. They all came, offering support, apologizing for not noticing sooner. Lauren grabbed her purse. I'm leaving. I'm not staying here for this circus. Go, I said quietly. But Lauren? That room you wanted to turn into my suite? Use it for something else. Because I'm not coming. I'm not living under the same roof with people who see me as a problem to be solved. Diane followed her daughter to the door. She turned back, her face twisted with rage. You're going to die alone, Patricia. Without family. Without anyone. I hope your pride is worth it. I met her eyes without flinching. I'd rather die alone with my dignity intact than live surrounded by people who despise me. And for your information, Diane, I'm not dying anytime soon. In fact, I'm just beginning to live. The door slammed behind them. Brandon sat alone at the head of the table, still holding my letter. His shoulders shook. He was crying. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, but didn't pull away. When you're ready to talk, really talk, not make excuses or ask for anything, call me, but not before you understand why I had to do this. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. I know, honey. You didn't see me at all. That was the problem. I picked up my purse. Theo appeared at my side, offering his arm. As I walked to the door, I looked back one last time. Brandon still sat there, surrounded by the ruins of the image he'd built. The successful son, the devoted husband, the man who had it all together. Now everyone knew the truth, and somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. 6 months later, I sat in a small cafe downtown, waiting. My life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. Not the fairy tale transformation the stories promise. I didn't jet off to Paris or fall in love with a handsome stranger. The reality was quieter, more real. I'd rented a modest one-bedroom apartment, used some of my money to volunteer at a women's shelter, teaching sewing to single mothers trying to make ends meet. Found purpose in helping others the way I wished someone had helped me. Sarah visited every Sunday. We'd have lunch, talk about life, about Brandon. She'd become the daughter I'd never had. Some nights I was lonely. Some nights I cried, mourning not the man Brandon was, but the boy he'd been. Grief is complicated. You can grieve someone who's still alive, but I also had something I'd never had before. Peace. The knowledge that I'd stood up for myself, that I'd drawn a line and said no more. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Mom, I'm here, outside. Is it okay to come in? I looked out the window. There he was, standing on the sidewalk. He looked different, thinner, older somehow. He wasn't wearing the expensive watch. His clothes were simple. He was 10 minutes early. We'd been exchanging emails for 3 months, short ones at first, then longer. He'd started therapy, real therapy, not couples counseling. He and Lauren were separated, possibly heading toward divorce. He'd cut contact with Diane completely. In his last email, he'd written, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve the chance to try. But if you're willing, I'd like to buy you coffee, just to listen, to hear your story without making excuses, to try to understand. I'd waited 2 weeks before responding, made him wait the way he'd made me wait so many times. Finally, I'd said yes. Now here he was. I texted back, come in. He walked through the door, saw me, and stopped. We looked at each other across the cafe, mother and son, strangers and family all at once. He walked over slowly, sat down. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Brandon." Silence, heavy with everything unsaid. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. "I know I don't deserve—" "Let's not start with what you deserve," I interrupted gently. "Let's start with what happened, and then we'll see where we go from there." He nodded, his eyes already wet. "Okay, yeah, okay." A waitress appeared. We ordered coffee, and then slowly, carefully, we began to talk. I don't know if we'll find our way back to each other. I don't know if Brandon can truly change, or if I can truly forgive. But for the first time in years, I'm not the only one trying. And that's enough for today. Maybe tomorrow it'll be enough for more. I received a letter, handwritten, from Brandon. Inside was a check for $147,000 and a note. "Mom, I can't give you back the years. I can't undo the hurt. But I can give you back what you gave me. Not as repayment. There's no amount that could repay what you sacrificed, but as acknowledgement, as proof that I finally see you. I sold the house. Lauren and I are divorcing. I've moved into a small apartment and I'm rebuilding my life the right way. The way you taught me before I forgot. I don't expect you to cash this. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know. I see you now, Mom. Finally. And I'm so sorry it took losing you to open my eyes. I love you." Brandon. I held that check for a long time. Thought about what it represented. Not just money, but recognition, validation, the acknowledgement I'd been craving. Then I did something that surprised even me. I called Brandon. "I got your letter," I said. "Mom, you don't have to—" "I'm cashing the check," I interrupted. "But not for me. I'm using it to start a foundation for single mothers who need help paying for their kids' education. In your father's name, David's Dream Fund." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "He'd love that." "I know. And Brandon, you're going to help me run it." "What?" "You have business skills I don't have, and you need to do something meaningful with them. So here's the deal. You help me build this foundation, and we'll see if we can build something else back too." Slowly, carefully, with honesty this time. "I don't deserve—" "Stop saying that. None of us get what we deserve. We get what we choose to create. So what do you choose?" Another silence. Then, "I choose to try, Mom, however long it takes." "Good, because healing isn't quick, and I'm not the same woman I was." "I know, and I'm not the same man either, or I'm trying not to be." "Then let's see who we can become."